There's a book quoted in the New Testament that most modern Bibles don't include. What does it tell us? What secrets does the Book of Enoch reveal? Immediately, there are several writings that bear Enoch's name, but when people talk about Enoch, in the ancient apocalyptic world they usually mean First Enoch, the long Ethiopic collection commonly called One Enoch. It presents a world of heavenly journeys, fallen angels, giants devouring the earth, secret knowledge passed to humans, and dramatic visions of final judgment. But beyond the sensational images, it also offers a window into how many Jews and early Christians imagined heaven, angels, history, and divine justice. On this channel we explore ancient texts and early religious history through long-form, source-based analysis. First, let me show you the roadmap for this exploration. We'll set Enoch against its Genesis origin and manuscript history, then walk the 5 main sections of One Enoch: Watchers, Parables, Similitudes, Luminaries, Dreams, and the Epistle, looking at what each part says, what it meant in its historical context, what evidence we have for its date, and how it influenced later Jewish and Christian thought. If you want a deep dive series on apocalyptic literature, subscribe and check the playlist linked below. Enoch appears briefly in Genesis. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more. That terse note is the seed. One Enoch explodes that seed into an elaborate pseudepigraphon. The book claims to preserve revelations given to Enoch, the antediluvian patriarch, who is taken into heaven and shown secret things. Pseudepigraphy, the practice of attributing a text to an ancient or famous figure, is common in apocalyptic literature. The book's own voice says it comes from Enoch, but modern scholarship treats that as a literary device. The question is not whether someone named Enoch actually wrote it 3,000 years ago. The question is what communities produced and transmitted these visions, why they gave them to Enoch, and what historical moments shaped their language. Manuscript evidence is crucial for answering those questions. One Enoch survives complete only in Jayas, classical Ethiopic, where it is preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon. But fragments and translations betray a much wider ancient circulation. Several Aramaic fragments of Enochal material were recovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. These fragments date roughly to the late Second Temple period and show that copies, at least of parts of the book, circulated in Palestine. Greek, Latin, and Syriac pieces also exist. In other words, the full text as we have it in Ethiopic is one transmission line, but the ideas circulated in many languages and communities. On dating, the majority of scholars place the core composition within the Hellenistic to Maccabean era, roughly a few centuries before and around the 1st century BCE, because many of its predictions read like vaticinium ex eventu, visions written after the fact that are presented as prophecy. The Dreams section in particular appears to encode Hellenistic political turmoil, with symbolism that fits Maccabean-era events. So, the book claims ancient authorship. Historical and textual evidence suggest a later composite compilation, shaped by crises in the Hellenistic world. Now let's enter the 5-part structure of First Enoch, because each part feels like a different genre, stitched into a larger apocalypse. First, the Book of the Watchers. The Watchers, roughly 1 Enoch 1-36, gives us one of the most vivid ancient answers to the problem of evil. According to this section, a group of heavenly beings, called the Watchers, descend to earth, lust after human women, and take wives. Names matter here. Semjasa, also spelled Semiasa, is presented as a leader, and Azazel is singled out as the teacher of forbidden arts. These angels don't only break sexual boundaries. They instruct humanity in things that the author regards as illicit: sorcery, metallurgy, cosmetics, astrology, and other kinds of technical knowledge that lead to violence and social breakdown. Their offspring are the giants, monstrous Nephilim who devour the crops and humanity, and bring chaos. The narrative ties this corruption to divine judgment. Enoch is taken into heaven to intercede. The heavenly court condemns the watchers and decrees punishment, which includes the flood as a cleansing response. The theological stakes here answer a pressing ancient question. Where do demons come from? How did death, suffering, and idolatry enter the world? In First Enoch, the mingling of divine and human boundaries produces not just moral wrongdoing but ontological distortion, beings who are neither properly human nor divine. This image of angels instructing humans in arts that lead to social decay does two things for its original readers. First, it supplies an explanation for the existence of demonic corruption and dangerous technologies. Metallurgy, for example, is personified as a cause of warfare. Second, it reflects anxiety about elites and elites' knowledge. The transmission of specialized skills can mean power, and for an oppressed community, explanations that link injustice to illicit transfer of power have rhetorical weight. Manuscript evidence for the Watchers portion appears among the Aramaic fragments at Qumran and in the Ethiopic tradition, supporting the idea that this narrative was widely known in late Second Temple Judaism. A short fragment of the text's mood. The book speaks of angels who deserted the high heaven and taught men sorcery. First Enoch 6:1-2. That phrase captures both betrayal and contamination. But here's the twist. While the Watcher's narrative is often read as a literal mythic explanation of evil, many scholars treat its history as theological storytelling shaped by later realities. The image of giants devouring the earth also functions symbolically. It dramatizes social predators, oppressors, foreign rulers, corrupt elites, who consume the resources and lives of common people. This is where vaticinium ex eventu enters the picture. Certain passages that look like future prophecy may actually be commentary on known events recast as cosmic drama. Keep that in mind as we move to the parables. The parables, or similitudes, circa 1 Enoch 37-71, shift tone dramatically. Here we find one of the most debated features of First Enoch: messianic imagery, especially the figure often called the Son of Man, or the Elect One. The parables depict a heavenly figure who executes judgment, sits on a throne of glory, and vindicates the righteous. Some passages read like Jewish messianic expectation. Others resonate strongly with later Christian language about Jesus. Scholars debate fiercely about origins and influence. Some argue the Son of Man tradition in First Enoch is a Jewish precedent to the New Testament's use of the phrase. Others caution that the similitudes might contain Christian-era interpolations, sections added or revised in communities that were already forming Christological language. The majority position tends to treat at least parts of the parables as pre-Christian, reflecting an independent Jewish Son of Man concept, because the imagery of an eschatological agent who receives authority and judges is not unique to Christianity. But because the similitudes survive only in later translations, and because they display theological developments, scholars remain cautious. Content-wise, the parables intensify the book's concern for divine justice. The Elect One is depicted as an eschatological judge who will punish sinners and exalt the righteous. There's also an ethical thrust. The righteous are not passive. They endure suffering, and the text promises vindication. The imagery is cinematic. Heavenly thrones, cosmic assemblies, and the destiny of kings and oppressors. In short, the parables amplify the book's message. God will not leave injustice unaddressed. But note the interpretive care required. While the parables echo themes that Christians later read in light of Jesus, treating 1 Enoch as a direct source that proves Christian doctrine oversteps what the text and evidence support. Instead, it's safer to think in terms of shared symbolic repertoire. Both Jewish and Christian writers drew on a common apocalyptic imagination that circulated images like the Son of Man. After judgment-themed parables, First Enoch abruptly turns technical in the Book of the Luminaries, First Enoch 72-82. This section reads like an astronomical and calendrical treatise. It offers a cosmological map of the solar cycle and insists on a 364-day solar calendar. Why does that matter? Because calendar debates in antiquity had real religious consequences. Festival timing, liturgical rhythms, and community identity hinged on whether a group followed a lunar solar calendar or a solar calendar. The luminaries presents a cosmic order governed by angelic stewards who track the sun and moon's paths. This isn't mere scientific curiosity. It's a claim about proper worship and the correct ordering of sacred time. Some Jewish groups at the time, e.g., certain sects associated with Qumran, favored a solar calendar, and the presence of calendar material in 1 Enoch suggests the book participated in those debates. Theologically, the luminaries tie cosmic order to divine justice. The calendar is not neutral. It expresses the rhythm of God's judgment and mercy. If you want to understand how an ancient community understood seasonality as part of sacred order, this book is instructive. Then come the dream visions, or animal apocalypse. First Enoch 83-90. This section narrates 2 dreams, one a personal vision, the other a long allegory in which human history appears as animals and symbolic kingdoms. Here, Enoch sees a sequence of animals that stand for patriarchs, kings, and empires. Sheep, wolves, and so on stand in for Israel, foreign oppressors, Alexander the Great, and the Hellenistic successors. The text's allegorical moves are often precise enough that many scholars identify clear allusions to Hellenistic events, especially the conquests of Alexander and the later Seleucid and Ptolemaic struggles, culminating in the crises associated with Antiochus Epiphanes and the Maccabean revolt. That's why scholars read this section as shaped by the Maccabean era and treat certain prophecies as vaticinium ex eventu. The text recounts what has already happened in coded, symbolic form and then projects further hope for deliverance. In other words, the dream visions transform historical trauma into cosmic narrative. Foreign rulers become wolves. Israel's suffering becomes an animal apocalypse. And the promise of vindication becomes a cosmic reset. The ethical and political edge of the dreams deserves emphasis. For a community confronting imperial domination and internal struggles, allegory is not mere entertainment. It is a way to interpret suffering, to maintain identity, and to portray eventual divine reversal. The dreams, therefore, offer both consolation and resistance. They tell oppressed readers that the world's predators will not have the last word. Finally, the Epistle of Enoch, First Enoch 91:1-8, functions like a pastoral exhortation and apocalypse in miniature. It urges righteous behavior, warns against unjust wealth and oppression, and promises imminent judgment on the wicked. The epistle collects ethical teachings, eschatological promises, and admonitions to endurance. Social justice themes are prominent. Oppressors, corrupt judges, and the accumulation of unjust wealth receive strong condemnation. The text thus blends cosmic visions with concrete moral instruction, addressing the day-to-day anxieties of communities facing economic and social pressures. The epistle closes the collection with a call to integrity and patience. God's justice will vindicate the oppressed. Across these 5 parts, certain recurring images deserve attention because of how they traveled into other texts. The idea of heavenly intermediaries who reveal secrets, detailed cosmologies locating multiple heavens and special places for souls, and the figure of an eschatological elect one all appear in later Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature. Jude's short New Testament letter is explicit. Jude 1:14-15 quotes an Enochal prophecy almost verbatim. Enoch, the 7th from Adam, prophesied saying, "Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones," which confirms that early Christians encountered and sometimes trusted Enoch's authority. Church fathers also knew and sometimes used Enoch. Barnabas and Justin Martyr, among others, drew on Enochic motifs. Clement of Alexandria and Origen discussed it, and some patristic citations show familiarity with its content. Yet this reception was uneven. Augustine and others in the Western Church expressed reservations, and by the time canonical lists hardened across most of Christianity, First Enoch was largely excluded, except in Ethiopia, where Ge'ez translations preserved the entire book and integrated it into the biblical corpus. Why the exclusion elsewhere? Several reasons converge. One is authorship and authenticity. Many church leaders objected to texts that claimed ancient authorship but lacked convincing provenance. Pseudepigraphy made Enoch suspect to those who valued apostolic or historically verifiable sources. Another reason is theological fit. The Book of the Watcher's tales of angelic intercourse and cosmic monsters seemed too mythic or exotic for some theologians, who worried about doctrinal confusion. Additionally, as Jewish authorities finalized their own canons, certain apocalyptic compilations fell outside the rabbinic corpus. Since Christianity's canon formation drew heavily on both Jewish traditions and apostolic endorsements, books absent from mainstream Judaism faced difficulty in gaining broad Christian acceptance. Finally, practical transmission played a role. While Enoch circulated in the East, in Syriac and Greek forms, it survived fully only in Ge'ez, so its textual availability to Latin West readers was limited. Ethiopia's unique preservation shows how local canonical traditions can diverge from broader Christian norms. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church continued to read and revere Enoch, while most other communions did not. All of this raises a crucial scholarly caution. First Enoch's prophecies should not be read as straightforward predictions verified by later events. In many places the book uses vaticinium ex eventu, writing about past events as if foretold, to make theological claims. The dream's allegorical mapping of Hellenistic events is a prime example. That technique does not invalidate the book's theological or literary value. It contextualizes it. The text's authors are interpreters of history, not neutral reporters. They craft meaning by transforming political trauma into cosmic drama. So what broader theological and literary contributions did First Enoch make? First, it developed a robust angelology and demonology. The Watcher's narrative gives a genealogy to evil spirits and ties particular sins, knowledge misused, sexual transgression, and social violence, to cosmic corruption. Second, it helped elaborate the topology of the afterlife. Enoch's heavenly journeys describe places reserved for the righteous and the wicked, vivid landscapes of punishment and reward that helped later authors imagine heaven, hell, and intermediate zones. Third, it nourished messianic hopes. The elect one and Son of Man imagery supplied an eschatological template that could be adapted in different communities. Fourth, its calendrical claims illustrate how cosmology and liturgy intertwine. Cosmic order supports religious observance. Finally, literarily, the book's hybrid form, mythic narrative, parabolic teaching, technical astronomy, allegorical dreams, and epistolary admonition, shows the creativity of apocalyptic composition. It's not a single genre, but a composite project that aims to interpret the world from multiple angles. Now let's step back and address a few frequent interpretive questions with some nuance. Did First Enoch influence the New Testament? The short answer, yes and maybe. Influence is plausible in specific cases. Jude's quotation demonstrates direct knowledge. Parallels between First Enoch's Son of Man imagery and New Testament usage suggest shared symbolic resources. Whether Paul, Luke, or Matthew drew directly on First Enoch in every instance is a matter of debate. Scholars tend to speak in probabilities and affinities. Some New Testament writers likely drew on common apocalyptic traditions, among which Enochic motifs were prominent. Did the book predict Hellenistic rulers? The safest reading is that it recasts Hellenistic history in apocalyptic garb. Many prophecies correspond so closely to known events that scholars see retrospective composition. Is Enoch canonical? Only in the Ethiopian tradition is First Enoch part of the biblical corpus. Elsewhere it is non-canonical but influential. We should also ask, what does the popularity and persistence of Enochish material tell us about ancient religious imagination? It tells us that many communities were preoccupied with theodicy, the question of why God permits evil, and sought cosmic explanations that connected heavenly behavior to earthly calamity. It tells us that eschatological vindication mattered to people suffering oppression. Stories of a future elect one who will judge the wicked provided hope and encouragement. It tells us that knowledge could be ambivalent. Technical arts could liberate or enslave, depending on how they were used. And it tells us that ancient boundaries between heaven and earth were porous in the imagination. Human life and divine counsel intersect in ways that modern readers may find strange, but that made theological and moral sense to those communities. For the historically minded viewer, if you want to pursue primary sources, the best steps are to compare translations and to consult the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments alongside the Ethiopic text. Short bibliographical pointers. Scholarly collections of 1 Enoch in English include critical translations with notes. Collections on Second Temple apocalypticism place Enoch among related literature like Daniel and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Patristic readers can consult commentaries that trace citations in early Christian authors. See the description for links and a recommended bibliography. Before I close, I'll read a brief fragment to give a sense of the book's voice. The style ranges from courtroom drama to visionary awe. Here is a short Enochic fragment. And behold, a figure like a son of man was seated on the throne of glory. Or Enoch 46:3. Sephati First Enoch 71.14. That phrase, son of man, echoes through ancient texts and invites multiple interpretations. A celestial judge, an archetypal human vindicated by God, or a symbolic title for an agent of divine justice. Note how compact imagery carries heavy theological freight. So where does that leave our original question? What secrets does the Book of Enoch reveal? It does not hide conspiracies. It reveals contours of ancient thought. How some Jews conceived angelic activity. How communities interpreted historical trauma as part of cosmic conflict. How visions of heaven and judgment supported ethical exhortation. And how calendar disputes and liturgical practice mattered to identity. It reveals a vibrant and contested textual world, one in which ideas circulated across languages and communities, were reshaped and sometimes preserved in surprising places like medieval Ethiopian monasteries. Enoch's modern absence from most Bibles obscures how influential its images were in antiquity. Its survival in Ge'ez is a reminder that the Christian literary terrain was not uniform. Local canons preserved different voices. For students of early Judaism and Christianity, Enoch is not proof text, but evidence. It is evidence for questions about belief, practice, and imagination in a formative period. As historians, we treat its claims carefully, distinguishing between the text's own theological claims and what we can assert historically, while also appreciating its power as literature and theology. In closing, Enoch's secrets are less about secret knowledge to be exploited, and more about a secret history of religious imagination, how people once framed injustice, divine order, and hope. If this exploration has piqued your curiosity, download the bibliography and links in the description to read translations, Dead Sea Scroll fragments, and patristic excerpts. Watch the linked videos on fallen angels and on the Son of Man motif for further context. Enoch invites us to read ancient texts with both wonder and caution. Wonder at the vividness of its visions, caution about how we apply them. If this exploration of the Book of Enoch was valuable to you, consider subscribing to the channel. We publish new long-form explorations of ancient texts apocalyptic literature, and early religious history every day. Thanks for listening. And if you dive into 1 Enoch yourself, keep an eye on language, context, and the many voices that shaped its composite message. Subscribing helps you follow future episodes in this series and supports this kind of careful, source-based work.